Writers, let's talk appositive phrases. An appositive phrase is a noun phrase, usually starting with a noun or a pronoun, maybe with some modifiers, and it immediately follows another noun in a sentence and essentially renames or describes that noun in greater detail. It's a really useful tool to provide additional description within a sentence, or even join sentences, or maybe even add some really interesting rhythm into your prose. We'll look at some examples of this in literature, but also knowing your appositives will help correct some very common comma errors. So that's good too. Let's take a look at two sentences that we might join. Ernest Hemingway was a popular writer. He fought in World War I. Now, this is grammatically correct, but it's just a bit dull. We have the same exact sentence structure in both sentences, and in that first sentence, our verb is was, which is always pretty bleh. So we could join the sentences using the appositive, and it might look something like this. The popular writer Ernest Hemingway fought in World War I. In this example, Ernest Hemingway serves as an appositive, renaming our subject, which is writer. Now compare that with this sentence. Ernest Hemingway, the popular writer, fought in World War I. In this case, popular writer is our appositive, adding some additional context to our subject, Ernest Hemingway. Notice how in that first example, the appositive does not have commas around it, whereas in the second, it does. This is because in that first example, we have a restrictive appositive, and the second is non-restrictive. What this means is that in that first example, the appositive Ernest Hemingway is necessary information as it tells us which popular writer we're talking about. Hence, it does not receive commas. If we were to take the appositive out, we wouldn't know which writer we're talking about. Whereas in the second example, if we remove the appositive, the popular writer, we still know who we're talking about. Hence, we use commas to denote that non-restrictive appositive. Think of it this way. If your appositive is adding additional but unnecessary detail about the noun it's modifying, use commas. If the information is essential in identifying that noun, then no commas. Let's take a look at some examples of the appositive from literature. From Great Expectations by Charles Dickens, quote, "In an armchair, with an elbow resting on the table and her head leaning on that hand, sat the strangest lady I've ever seen or shall ever see. She was dressed in rich materials, satins and lace and silks, all of white." Here, Dickens uses the appositive phrase, satins and lace and silks, to expand on what he means by materials, thus providing a richer image and immersion into that scene. From Emma by Jane Austen, quote, "Mr. Knightley, a sensible man about 7 or 38, was not only a very old and intimate friend of the family, but particularly connected with it, as the elder brother of Isabella's husband." In this example, Jane Austen introduces a character and gives us some information with which to remember and distinguish him using that appositive in a very efficient manner. But appositives can also be a great tool for rhythm in a sentence. From Tinkers by Paul Harding, quote, "His despair came from the fact that his wife saw him as a fool, a tinkerer, a copier of bad verse from two-penny religious magazines." Here, the appositives sort of stack up on each other using the rule of threes. Notice how that string of appositives seem to reflect the character spiraling in self-deprecating thoughts. You can almost imagine this character chastising themselves, getting more and more specific about what it is that they despise in themselves, or in this case, what they fear someone despises about them.